Hello and welcome. And sorry that you got an abbreviated version of the introduction. My computer gave me an extra message before the go live, and so there was a little bit of delay in the go live, but we did make it on, and here we are. And welcome to my guests. And StreamYard only lets you put one name on the screen, so the name up there is James Walker, and it is under the correct person. But
he must increase. I must decrease.
And Bill Kluck is here as well. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks.
And welcome to everyone who is in the chat already so far. I can see What the Beck, Jody Bishop, Devil Lynn, Mark Caesar, and Patrick. Welcome to all of you, as well as welcome to everyone watching in the future. Let's start out with just talking a little bit about who Bill Kluck and James Walker are and what it is that they do. James, we'll let you go first.
Well, I'm a Christian, actually, and the co-founder of something that we call the Atheist and Christian Book Club, along with my friend Bill, who's atheist. And I am a former Mormon who became an evangelical Christian. And then I have always been interested, though, since my conversion from Mormonism to Christianity, of what makes us think a religion is true or not true. Because I really believed Mormonism when I was a Mormon, and then I was like, okay, where did I go wrong, and how and why? And so I was helped by an organization called Watchman Fellowship. Later became a volunteer, then a staff member, and for many years now, I've been president of that organization. And I met Bill, who's a former Christian, now atheist, and we hit it off. We've been friends for about 6 years now, and we started something together that we call the Atheist and Christian Book Club, a monthly gathering of believers and skeptics, respectfully trying to be respectfully discussing important books from both perspectives. So we alternate. We do a Christian book one month, an atheist book the next month. And we've been doing that now for over 5 years, I believe. And so that's my background, my interest. Our ministry, Watchman Fellowship, is an apologetics ministry focusing mostly on interfaith evangelism, cults, the occult, controversial doctrines and practices. But I am still very interested in atheism and agnosticism. And so this is kind of part of a ministry. And what we want to do is try to create sane conversations. And in our case, it's become friendships. So we don't have to agree on the question of, is there a God, in order to be friends and enjoy each other's company. And I think the whole book club kind of works that way. What do you think, Bill?
Oh, absolutely. And we've had discussions all over America. New Orleans Baptist Seminary, we had a really nice talk there. New Mexico at the Baptist Convention. And all the Christians have been extremely nice to me. We just recently, if you go to Watchman, we had a little debate talk at Pleasant View Baptist, which I thought went real well. And you can watch it on Watchman's YouTube channel. But yeah, the next book, by the way, is Eric Hernandez's Lazy Approach to Evangelism.
So and Eric Hernandez is going to be my guest next week. So you'll get a little taste of the book, and Bill is going to join me for that one as well, primarily because it is Bill that put me in touch with Eric Hernandez. And Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but Eric Hernandez used to work for Leighton Flowers, correct?
Yes, and Leighton's left and gone on his own. And his podcast is Soteriology 101, which you interacted with. And he saw your video where you interviewed the Calvinist and so forth. And Leighton, I'm a big fan of Leighton, big fan of Eric. And I agree with Eric's approach that Christians need to get involved in apologetics. It used to be 20 years ago, not so necessary. But now every young kid with a microphone and laptop can become an atheist YouTuber, and a kid's going to look at that and it might challenge their faith. So what I preach to the churches is have a preemptive approach, get the bad news out. And then when the Christian young people learn it, then they're not shocked.
We're a little bit skeptical sometimes of Bill. I love Bill, but he's trying to help the churches too much, I think, a little bit. So what's the end goal here? I don't quite understand.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
The last at Pleasant View Baptist Church, I let everybody know First Timothy, which I'm sure you'll agree with, was not written by Paul. It's not even disputed that much. So the minister afterwards said, always learning, but never coming to the truth. And he said, Paul said in Timothy. So just like you, Kelly, is when you talk to that Calvinist and you told him that there are no original manuscripts. All the authentics are gone. The first is the John Rollins, which is just a fragment. And I went to the British Library, 350 AD, we have the first complete copy of the New Testament. So what I love about you, and I'm a big fan of your channel, of course, and you personally, is you were educating a Calvinist, and they know everything. So isn't that great?
Yeah, that is what drew me to Calvinism for the time that I was a Calvinism, is the pseudo-intellectualism. And I did not realize at the time that I went into it that it was pseudo. It appears to be a very intellectual faith. And it appears so because of people like Mark Driscoll and Wayne Grudem, who
John MacArthur.
John MacArthur, people who write these books that are difficult to read. And it takes some serious study to try to get through these books. And so you feel like, hey, I'm really getting down into the real word deal, and the truth, and people who really know what they're talking about. And that was the appeal of it to me. James, I have a question for you with regards to watchman.org. And that is, I know that the Mormons are they have the Watchtower.
That's Jehovah's Witnesses.
I'm sorry, that's Jehovah's Witnesses. Sorry. But because you're called Watchmen, I'm wondering if Jehovah's Witnesses sometimes come to you thinking you're Jehovah's Witness.
It does confuse people sometimes. And there's some other watch names that are also connected with questionable groups, Watchman Nee and Watchman on the Wall. And there's a bunch of different watches out there. So sometimes people do confuse and think that I am with the Jehovah's Witnesses, but Watchman, we're Watchman, not Watchtower. And we take our name from Ezekiel 33, where God places a watchman on the wall to help protect the city. And so I won't come to your door with any magazines, I promise. And we are watching the Watchtower. So we're not part of the Watchtower.
Yeah, they're experts on cults, by the way. So great resource. And James has taught me a lot about Mormonism. The thing with Mormonism, and this is what he taught me, 1832, Joseph Smith predicted the temple would be built in Independence, Missouri. Mm-hmm. 60 years later, who's the guy? Oliver Pratt?
Orson Pratt.
Orson Pratt says, they're asking him, wait a minute, where's the temple? And he goes, wait a minute, generation's not all gone yet. There's still some people living, give it time. Well, obviously, it's been 100 years since then. Everybody's dead. Joseph Smith is a false prophet. So the chances that Mormonism is true are like almost nil. DNA evidence disproves it when that convicts killers. But with Christianity, you do have evidence for one thing. Gary Habermas has just written a 1,000-page book. Were you familiar with that? Mm-hmm. So that is evidence.
I haven't read it, and I don't have a copy. But I've heard Paula Gia talk about it, and for years it was, when is this book coming? When is this book coming? And then now it's finally come. At least volume 1 has, and I've watched Paula Gia's review of the first volume.
Let me see if I can get you a copy.
Excuse me?
You want me to see if I can get you a copy? Kind of expensive.
Yeah, they are kind of expensive. That would be nice, but I'm in the middle of Bart Ehrman's Armageddon. I've got Elisa Childers's book on her deconstruction waiting. I still haven't finished The God Delusion.
Well, anyway, you'll make a good doorstop. And by the way, there's 3,000 pages to go. He has 3 more volumes coming out.
Right.
So, but here's the deal: is there's a chance Christianity's true. Okay, but here's the bottom line: is we had the great Dale Allison, one of the top 5 scholars in the world. Even Michael Licona says he has a monster. I'm only 20% of the scholar he is. But he admits in his epilogue, Jesus was wrong about the second coming. Okay. So even though the best way to understand Jesus is an apocalyptic prophet who thought the world was going to end in his lifetime, it still is, you still could have a Christian apologetic for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question here that I've been holding for a bit, and it is a question to you, James.
Yeah.
James, did your beliefs change when you changed denomination? And if not, why did you change your religion?
Yeah, Mormonism probably is not best classified as simply the denomination of classical Christianity. Mormonism, although it uses Christian terms, and everybody, I did as well as a Latter-day Saint, a Mormon, would self-identify as Christian. I didn't realize how different it was than traditional Christianity. So I was taught as a Mormon that God, before he was God, he was once a man, that he's married to a heavenly mother, that God and his wife procreate billions of spirit children. I'm one of them. And if I was an obedient, worthy Latter-day Saint and obeyed all the laws and ordinances, I potentially could become a new God myself one day if I achieve what they call celestial exaltation. And so I kind of thought all Christians thought that, or something very similar to that. But I had some Christian friends that went, no, that's not anywhere close to what we believe. And through a long process, and doubts crept in and questions, and began to, as Bill was saying, try to fact check some of the things I had been told about the Book of Mormon. And I came to the devastating conclusion that I had been misled. Man, maybe they were sincere and really believed it, but it's a lot of that is demonstrable. You can check it out, these claims. And so then I went through a period of time where I thought, I don't even know what I believe. If the Book of Mormon's not true, how do I even know if anything's true? And so
that's what I did with the Bible. That is exactly what I did with the Bible.
We have some parallel examples. Now, I came out on the other end still believing the Bible and still believing that there's a God, obviously. But that was debatable for a short period of time for me. It wasn't a foregone conclusion with me. So I did leave Mormonism and joined a evangelical church. I'm Baptist now, so my religion did change. But I would go so far as to say it was not just a denomination or even a religion change; it was a whole worldview change. I went from polytheism, the belief that there are many gods and I could become a god one day, to the idea that there's only one true God and that job is kind of taken. Don't even ask for an application. It's not a good thing to want to be a god. And so it was a major shift for me. I lost family, and I know that works both directions. There are Christians who become atheists who lose family, unfortunately. I was on the opposite side of that. I was a Mormon who lost Mormon family and friends when I transitioned to traditional Christianity. And but yeah, that's why I did change religions completely. But also, as I said at the very beginning, this is what gave me a real interest in this whole thing of how do we even know what we know, or epistemology? How do we know those things? I don't go on sincerity anymore. I think I'm a sincere Christian. I want to think I am. But sincerity is not good enough. I was a sincere Mormon. It didn't make it true. And so this is, to me, a fascinating thing. This is why I love our book club. It forces me to do what I ought to do anyway. Every other month, I'm reading a really, really good atheist book. And it helps to me to challenge my own thoughts and presuppositions. What ends up happening with this is, like, when I speak in churches all over the country, and every church, they're like, they eat up everything I say, and I'm brilliant in every church I go to. At our Atheist and Christian book club, I learned that some of my ideas are easier to support than others.
And speaking of testimony, Mormons have this thing in their church. If you've ever gone to a ward, it is the most boring thing on the face of the earth. And their conferences, everyone sounds the same, and it's just dreadful. But what Eric Hernandez says in The Lazy Approach to Evangelism is, your testimony's fine, but you need to provide evidence too. If you go to the Society of Biblical Literature, nobody cares about your testimony. They care about the evidence you present. So that's a great point in his book. And James, 6 years ago, I said, James, come on to the Metroplex social gathering down here. What's the name of
Jay Gilligan's.
Jay Gilligan's.
A bar and grill in downtown Arlington.
James goes, that's 100 yards from my office. So he came to it, made friends. And
that was one thing that they really rolled out the red carpet to me. So for the better part of a year, actually almost exactly a year, at least once or twice a month, sometimes all 4 weeks, I would go to their fellowship dinner. And boy, we talked about all kinds of stuff. The Kalam cosmological argument, the fine tuning argument. We talked about the Dallas Cowboys and the Texas Rangers and
the Green Bay Packers.
Great relationships. What was that? I didn't catch it.
I said the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like them too.
Once a Packer fan, always a Packer fan.
Oh, wow.
I've lived in like 6 different states, but it doesn't matter where I go. I'm always a Packer fan.
That's great. Wow.
James, now in the Mormon religion, only men can become gods, correct? And a woman, if she wants to achieve godhood, has to be called up out of the grave by her husband?
That is not official doctrine, but a lot of Mormons, especially older Mormons, are convinced that that is the case. When you go through the secret temple ritual, I've only done the baptism for the dead in the Salt Lake City temple, but in the marriage ceremony in the temple, each of the marriage couple, they both get a secret name. And the husband, of course, knows his own secret name. He knows his wife's secret name, but his wife never is to be told the husband's secret name. And so what happens allegedly is on the morning of the first resurrection, the men are resurrected and then they go to their wives, kind of like Sleeping Beauty, and they kind of lift the veil, the wedding clothes that they wear in the temple, and they lift that veil over the corpse and call out her secret name, and that actually resurrects her. But they don't have to do that, apparently. And so, especially in the old days, 100 years ago, of Mormon polygamy, so maybe you have, 12 wives and 42 children, and you may choose to resurrect 3 or 4 of these, but not resurrect 4 or 5 of the others. And so, now that's not official Latter-day Saint doctrine, but it is a very common thing that I hear from a lot of, especially older Mormons.
I heard that way back in the 80s. From a couple. They were not Mormon, but they had done some looking into Mormon theology. And they also had some friends who were Mormon, and he would control his wife by threatening her, if you don't do what I say, I'm not going to call you out of the grave.
I've heard it. I won't call you. That's how I heard it, the threat. I've heard that in person. I've heard that threat. I will like to say, though, that that's not in the Book of Mormon or any of the Mormon official scripture. And Mormonism is constantly changing. So when I was a Mormon, no black person was allowed to go into a Mormon temple or hold the priesthood. Even if you're a man, a black man cannot hold. You can be a Mormon, you can be a member of the church, but you cannot hold the priesthood. And that doctrine changed. And now a lot of Latter-day Saints think the younger people think I'm lying about it, because there was no way. Of course, black people can hold the priesthood. 1978, that was the first time that they allowed that to happen. And so it's constantly changing, and that's part of the challenge of being in Christian apologetics. If you're wanting to track other religions, some of them, in the case of Mormonism being an example, constantly changing the doctrines.
And that was true in some Christian denominations as well. I mean, Bob Jones University did not accept black students until they were forced to by the federal government.
Yeah, I'm a Southern Baptist, but the history of the Southern Baptist Convention, which I'm Southern Baptist, does have a racist component to it, because slavery and the whole states' rights issues of the Civil War were inexorably linked to the division of the Southern Baptists from the Northern Baptists, just like the Southern states from the Northern states. So there was a background, a connection with slavery that was at the foundation of the denomination. Now, there's been a public apology by the Southern Baptist Convention for that, and but it's something that I'm very aware of.
We have a question for you, Bill, from Daniel Ray, and it's got a word in here I'm not familiar with, so if I mispronounce it, please forgive me. Didn't Paul use an amanuensis to write Romans? Could he not have used that for other letters?
It's like
Is that okay?
Oh, I have no idea if he used a secretary or not. So, but
think
Romans isn't authentic. It's not like Timothy or Ephesians or Titus or Peter. It's an authentic letter.
Yeah, there's evidence that he did, and from my opinion on that, but because he will sometimes say in one of his letters, see my signature in my own hand. So in other words, he would sign it at the end, but it was not uncommon in the Greco-Roman world of the first century to use secretaries and to dictate and to even have the secretary redo the wording, but you then would sign off on it and that you've double checked that's exactly what you wanted to say. So I don't know if that had to do with the question of authentic versus inauthentic.
Yes, that's exactly what the question had to do with, the authenticity of First Timothy.
The people that criticize or disbelieve in the authenticity of the pastoral letters, First, Second Timothy, Titus would be an example. It's not over the issue of whether a secretary was used.
No, it's about there weren't bishops. When Paul was writing to Corinthians, he doesn't address any bishops to correct the problems, where it does talk about bishops in a church structure that wouldn't have been there when Paul was writing. But what we believe, by the way, we had David Fitzgerald. I don't know if you've had him on, who wrote Jesus, Mything in Action.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, Robert Price.
Methodist.
Methodist. Richard Carrier, which I know you're familiar with.
Okay, Richard Carrier, I know. Yeah.
He's the scholarly, as long with Robert Price, who have legitimate PhDs that believe Jesus never existed.
Okay.
We at the book club, most atheists believe that he did exist for a variety of reasons. He's multiply attested in the New Testament. If you go to Q, M, and L sources that Matthew and Luke drew from, that aren't in Mark, like the Lord's Prayer, the Beatitudes, and so forth, you have another witness to Jesus. Also, and James, help me on this, when Peter went and met Paul in Antioch, there was a dispute. It's like Paul called him down. What are you doing listening to being a hypocrite and not eating with the Gentiles who you were eating with? The Gentiles. Because the people from Jerusalem church were saying, oh my gosh, don't eat with those Gentiles. So you have real life conflict with real life people. And James said something about the cardboard characters.
Yeah, that's one thing. When I became more familiar with the Bible later, I began to realize how all the characters in the Book of Mormon were like paper thin. They were either very, very good and never did anything bad, or they were very, very bad, never did anything good. It was not realistic. And so when you read the Bible, you have King David, who's a man after God's own heart, who slays Goliath and then can't get his family life right. And then has these wives and concubines and murders a guy. And I think, how, because he's a real person, he's complex. And so you get that in the Bible, real characters versus the book of Mormon.
And with Jesus, remember the Syrophoenician woman that says, oh, Jesus, can you heal me? And he goes, why should I give the children's pearls and throw them to the dogs, or children's bread and throw it to the dogs? And she says, well, even the dogs eat some crumbs. I mean, that makes Jesus look like kind of a jerk. So that seems to have an air of authenticity to me. And remember in Mark 6, where he couldn't perform any big miracles. So there is some verisimilitude to the New Testament. Wouldn't you agree?
I would say that there's evidence to me that it's not how you would make up the story. You wouldn't make the disciples, the apostles that you're trying to promote, being bumbling idiots throughout the entire gospel story, that they can't get anything right and they're constantly trying to find out who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom. And if you're writing the story to try to get converts, you don't show that side of it. So there's an honesty there that I think it shows the people, even the heroes, warts and
Peter's denial and so forth. But here's the flip side. And the great Dale Allison, I asked him this. I said, Dale, the birth narratives. He goes, I don't see a lot of history in that. I said, "Ooh, how about the post-resurrection appearances?" Well, you're probably talking legend there. And as I said, the zombies in Matthew, where they had dead saints go to. Oh, he goes, "Oh, please." So this is one of the best scholars that admits you have a lot of legendary embellishment.
Now, Bill, let me balance that a little bit.
Wasn't this like obvious?
Now, Dale Allison, I like Dale a lot. Now, a lot of times, Kelly, we do have, most of the time, we have the author of the book we're dealing with in the book club with us on the Zoom meeting. And so Dale Allison was our guest author, and we had him on and we asked him about this. But the controversy with Dale was this was the author that the atheist wanted.
Absolutely. He's our patron saint.
Now he's a Christian in the sense that he is a minister of a denomination, but he is not a traditional Christian. He's very, very liberal. Let's say it that way. Very, very liberal. So it was kind of a controversy in the book that, well, we would like to have Dale, but we don't want him to count as a Christian author.
So we didn't know how to.
He's actually kept talking against most of our positions. And so because of his being a liberal Christian. And so he was a little bit upset when he found that out.
He is. Anyway, he's very offended. It's like, listen to yourself,
Bill. He's kind of offended about it. But the atheist wanted him real bad. And I wouldn't mind hearing him. I just didn't want him to count as one of our Christians.
But here's an example. As you know, in Matthew, Judas hangs himself. In Acts, he falls off a cliff, his guts burst out. So I said, what do you think of that contradiction, Dale? And he goes, well, there's another one. I went, really? He goes, yeah, in Papias, he gets run over by a wheelbarrow. So I said, that's why we love you, Dale, because you're admitting to admit there's contradictions in the Bible. So instead of trying to reconcile them, just admit, live with the tension. Does that make sense? And just like this is
absolutely. Yeah, some of the things I enjoy going on Twitter, and part of the reason is because the arguments I get into with believers are amusing. Part of it is because when I want to float a new idea, I float it there, and if it's a bad idea, people there will let me know that that's a bad idea.
Let you know, won't they?
Yeah. But again, we asked Dale, okay, Dale, we know both of these accounts can't be right. When Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, goes to Jerusalem and he says, stay in Jerusalem. Do not leave for 40 days. In Matthew, he tells him, go to Galilee.
Right.
And Dale goes, well, the more primitive tradition, probably the historical one, is in Matthew. And remember, again, criteria of embarrassment, how do we know these are, somewhat true, is the disciples are looking at the risen, resurrected second person of the Trinity in all his glory. And what do they say? Some doubt it. So I love that transparency about it.
But as the comment I have up here right now, per aspera ad astra says, it really depends on the motive for writing the narrative. Embarrassing anecdotes can serve a purpose as well.
Well, exactly, like the women discovering the tomb is one of the Christians' trump cards. But Mark was about marginalized people, so he might have put the women discovering the tomb to, agree with the marginalization of, having the marginalized find the risen Jesus, right? Who knows?
I've been holding a couple of things for a bit. Zhang's comment, I discovered the Bible was false when I saw its claims didn't comport to the reality we experience. And I am exactly with you, because that's really what destroyed my faith, was when I heard Aaron Ra say, I'd been taught sola scriptura. The Bible is the complete, inerrant word of God. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And then he said, not only do we know that the flood couldn't happen, we know that it didn't happen. And we know that from biology, geology, history. And when he said the word history, my faith just vanished like a puff of smoke. Because for the first time, I thought about the fact that I know from having studied some ancient Chinese history that the whole civilization wasn't wiped out, barren for a few hundred years, and then restarted by a group of Babylonians that came from the Tower of Babel.
Well, it gets
And
worse. If you look at the
oh,
narrative, and this is what drives me crazy with atheists, is they don't understand the narrative. It's a blended narrative. The P writer of the 6th century, the priestly writer that has like 7 of the animals. And then you have the J writer that has
mhm,
only 2. You have
mhm.
the P writer 40 days, the flood lasts, the J 150. So unless you know Hebrew, you cannot see these contradictions in the narrative. So even the narrative is inconsistent. And of course, it came from the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you have a 7-day flood, you have a rectangular boat, and that this is clearly the case where it was 1,000-year. The Atrahasis and Epic of Gilgamesh narratives were written 1,000 years before. So on all levels, it just makes no sense.
Let's see. Some events in Paul's life parallel that of Josephus, like his shipwreck experience, which is very suspicious. That's new to me. I did not realize that Josephus wrote a similar shipwreck experience. Although shipwrecks were somewhat common in the day, wouldn't there have been a lot of people who had such experiences if they traveled extensively by ship?
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's probably a weak argument. But let me tell you a great story from Josephus. The emperor, was it Vespasian or whatever, has Josephus goes and sees 3 of his friends crucified. And he goes to the Emperor Vespasian, I think it was, and says, "You kind of crucified my friends, dude." And he goes, "Oh, my bad. Let's get them down off the cross right now." And so they come down off the cross, and one of them survives. Could you imagine the nightmares you would have if you were crucified and you know, got brought down from the cross? I mean, but that's probably a true account from Josephus.
Mhm, mhm.
Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that account, no, but it makes perfect sense to me because I know from having read some descriptions of crucifixions that it is not a quick death.
No.
It takes quite some time, and some people would linger for days on the cross. And because of that, yeah, it makes perfect sense that someone might be taken off the cross and still be alive.
Yeah, it's a nice story.
Um, this particular broadcast came about because William Kluck is the one that told me that Light and Flowers was reviewing my video
Yes.
of my
Right back at
conversation
you,
with,
Leighton.
yeah, Paul Enns, and Bill introduced me to James and to the book club, and so that's how this whole show came about.
And because of Jim Hall, the Atheist Experience, a good
He
friend of
was
yours.
one of our charter members of our book club, Jim Hall,
Oh,
formerly
yeah.
of Atheist
Yes.
Edge.
Yeah. We love Jim, and he's a big disc golfer. So I'm trying to get him into pickleball. Like Eric Hoven, you're familiar with him down when I went
Mhm.
to Dinosaur Adventureland. Eric was nice enough. He couldn't have been better to me. Put me up at the ministry. And I mean, it's really interesting. His whole family works in the ministry. But I said, "Eric, you got to play pickleball." So just recently he showed me a picture of his family, and he actually did it. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, I love it. I can see why you get so addicted to it." So anyway, so that's what I try to build bridges between atheists and Christians, and that's what the book club's all about.
Mhm. You mentioned, having friends that are still believer unbeliever friendships, and actually the one friendship that I have that's still a real person she is a believer, and she was a friend of mine from a church that I went to in Huntsville here, and that was actually 2 churches before I became an atheist, and she has still remained in friendship with me, and we still have coffee together, usually once a week. I never bring up the topic of religion because I'm afraid of hurting her feelings, but anytime she brings the topic up, then I am not shy about responding to her.
Yeah, that's good. And again, I know on both sides of that equation, stories can be told about people who the friendship was dependent upon you being a part of the faith or being an atheist. So when an atheist converts to Christianity, they're probably going to lose a lot of atheist friends and vice versa. And so it's good when you have people who are friends indeed, and they are going to want to have a relationship with you regardless of your worldview or what you believe. So we we can be wrong about the question of is there a God and still be family or still be friends.
Oh, by the way, Dr. Brady Blevins looked at your YouTube video and said you were very fair, and I would love to be on your channel. He's the chair of the Department of Religion, whatever, at Arlington Baptist. So, you're getting some good reviews.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, shoot me his email and I'll send him an invitation. Okay.
So these people are very well thought out. They're very intellectual, and it's just a real refreshing thing. Like Daniel Ray, who turned me on to the fine structure constant, which is one of the best evidences for an invisible God that gets this stuff going. Because if it's off by like 4% either way, it's 1/137th. You don't get star or carbon formed in stars, and you don't get life. And fortunately, we've had some great authors like the guy that wrote Fortunate Universe, the physicist. Just amazing stuff as far as the preciseness of these parameters, like the gravitational constant and so forth. Now, Darwin versus Jesus in the background. Is that you?
Yeah, that we tried to come up with a logo for the book club, and obviously, if it's the Atheist and Christian book club, then Jesus is the obvious poster child for Christianity. But who do we pick for atheism? And so we debated Richard Dawkins, but maybe not good to have a living person that you should have as your. Then but anyway, we ended up with Darwin, which is not an exact great fit because I don't think Darwin was actually atheist technically, but he is kind of, anyway, that's the logo we came up with. We have Jesus and Darwin. Yes.
And by the way, I think we talked about this. Endogenous retroviruses are the best evidence. Now, evolution used to be, but these endogenous retroviruses, where they're on the same place in the genome with us, chimps and gorillas and so forth. And it seems just unmistakable that we came from a common ancestor. So it takes time for Christians and atheists to learn this stuff because it's very abstract and very difficult to understand unless you know genetics. And that's the thing. To do apologetics, you'd have to know Hebrew, Greek, cosmology, paleontology, archaeology. And we can't be proficient in everything. Although you come close, Kelly. So
one of the things
I consider myself a jack of all trades, master of none.
One of the things that we try to do on this is we do bring in the experts. So we have PhDs, and Gary Habermas has been one of our guest authors. A Universe from Nothing, Lawrence Krauss, New York Times bestselling writer. He's been one of our guest authors. We've been to pick his brain. But the challenge we have is none of us have PhDs in cosmology or physics or New Testament or philosophy. So, but what the picture that I try to have in mind is that we're kind of like the jury of the peers. So in the courtroom scene, you have the defendant attorney, the defense attorney, and you have the prosecutor, and they're bringing in their experts. And when you're in the jury, you don't say, well, the expert says, so I don't have a choice in this. No, our job is to listen to both experts, both competing experts. Which expert makes the best case that their position is the most logically, most probably true one? And so we become, by necessity, somewhat familiar with some of the arguments of cosmology and geology or whatever topic we're talking about. But we know we're not the experts, but it's our job to listen to the experts and then see which experts.
And I told Tim McGrew, the great Tim McGrew, do not lean on your own understanding, but trust in Bart Ehrman and tell else.
Yeah, Bart Ehrman's been one of our guest authors. It was a little bit frustrating for me, that particular book club, but I really appreciated him, and he's real sharp. And the other thing I like about Bart Ehrman, and I brought this up when he was our guest author, is although we're on the opposite sides of the issue, he is a tremendous critic of textual criticism of the New Testament, probably the number one critic of the Bible today. But he has also written a book against mythicism. And so he says, listen, I'm not a Christian, but to try to argue that Jesus never existed when we have so much evidence that he did, including non-Christian testimony, ancient testimony. And so I might disagree with Bart Ehrman on some of the fine points of textual criticism, but I certainly find something that I resonate with him in other categories.
Here's the deal. There is evidence for Christianity. I kind of disagree on Aaron Ra on this point, but let's take an example. In 1 Corinthians, I think it says Paul witnessed 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus. Some are who are alive today. So that
Paul doesn't say he witnessed that.
Tell me what
he's
he said.
Reciting a creed.
Yes. Okay. But 500 people witnessed the resurrected Jesus. Now that's 500 people. That's amazing. And some of whom are alive today, which appears to have some verisimilitude. But let me ask you, since you're the expert, you're the lawyer, wouldn't we love to see these people deposed? Wouldn't we like to know when they saw him, what Jesus was wearing? You go ahead. What do you think of that?
Well,
evidence?
Yeah, we don't know who these people are. We don't know when this event supposedly happened. We don't know where this event supposedly happened. And so to say that people could just go and check it out, obviously they cannot, because you wouldn't know who to ask. You go and ask some random person, did you see this? They say no. Well, that doesn't prove anything. They're just one of the people who wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a circumstantial argument to some degree, I think, because he's not giving a list of names and giving their email addresses where you can contact them personally. So, but he seems to be saying it as if something that his hearers would be nodding, like he didn't have to fill in the blanks because all of them knew that particular event that he was talking about. So it's reading between the lines, and it's not a under oath deposition. But again, we don't have that that I know of in any ancient.
But here's it's very troubling that Paul knew certain things about Jesus, that he had a Last Supper, that he had disciples. But he doesn't know about his parables, never mentions one parable, doesn't mention his miracles, doesn't mention Jesus' view on things like dietary laws when it could help their case. So it's very problematic. And I know the letters
never met Jesus.
Well, that's problem right there. That's why he's so aggressively in Galatians defends his apostleship, because I guess wouldn't you love to be in that Jerusalem meeting where they go, wait a minute, Paul, what's your deal? You haven't met Jesus. We knew him. So
James, one question I had for you. Are you married?
Yes.
Is your wife still Mormon?
No, I had left the Mormon church before we met. And so
okay.
Now, technically, I have to say, honestly, I was still on the rolls of the Mormon church, even though I had become an evangelical Christian before we were married. I was still on the rolls of the Mormon church. And so I wasn't actually, there was an excommunication trial while I was found guilty of basically heresy. And I was excommunicated in a bishop's court. And so that happened when I was like 28 years old, somewhere in there. But she was never a Mormon and didn't marry me when I was a Mormon.
But the great thing about James, he's got a big time testimony. He was a 4th generation Mormon. I mean, why couldn't God have given me that stuff so I could have the ministry like Watchman?
Well, you have the ex-Christian testimony.
Oh, right? Yeah. Well, that's like go to any deconstruction video on YouTube and, you can see that.
I had meant to do this at the very beginning of the show, and I forgot. It slipped my mind completely. Thank you for reminding me, May Atkinson. But happy Star Wars Day to everyone. May the 4th be with you.
Yes. And I'll throw in the competitor here, live long and prosper. That's the Star Trek.
That's my response to Christians who say that they will pray for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if they say, I'll pray for you, I say, live long and prosper.
Okay. All right.
Zhang says anyone can make the statement that 500, 5,000, or 50,000 people said something or saw something. Yeah.
Well, true. I acknowledge that.
Oh, and by the way, what we try to do, and I talked to Eric Hernandez about this, is steel man arguments. Like, I love your little thing with the straw man. Can you make a straw man? He keeps going in my head all the time. So maybe you can do something. What steel manning is, and James is beautiful at this, is in our talk, he talked about the problem of evil. And he was honest enough and transparent enough to say, look, there is a problem. Sure, you can account for the fall from man sin, but how about earthquakes and tornadoes and animal suffering? So that's steel manning. That's trying to give the best defense of the other's position. And I think you did a great job of that, right?
Yeah, but it works both ways. In our book club, there's been numerous times that one of the atheists there, I've said something and they say, well, James, I'm not quite, is this what you're trying to say? And they say it better than I did. And I thought, whoa, you do understand it. And yeah, I wish I had said it the way you said it. So instead of the straw man where you make a caricature or you belittle the person for even making the point or asking the question, you want to do the opposite. We want to steel man the person's position, not straw man it.
Okay. Because you brought it up, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen, but I had to go grab a copy of it because I'm not all that tech proficient and I'm not sure how to get to it without doing it this way. But it's a very short video that I made with Art Against Ignorance. Art did the music and the singing for this for me. Let's see. Oh, shoot. If I do it this way, you won't be able to hear it. Let's see. How do I get it so that you can hear it?
By the way, in the background is some of the books and some of the people we've had. So,
here's how I can do it so you can see it. Just a minute, or so you can hear it. Just a minute. Oh, and people are probably getting bored while I'm trying to get this up. There we go. Never mind. Even the other copy that I've got, there's no sound on it. So
a lot of people don't appreciate how hard it is to try to juggle so many things at the same time, and then also have a cogent thought at the same time.
Oh, by the way, I enjoyed your interview and your transparency and honesty on Harmonic Atheist, Tim Mills. I really enjoyed your testimony, or your deconstruction, that is. So,
well, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And, the Christian pastors need to recognize that this deconstruction thing is just going to get worse and worse. So hopefully they can learn to address, this phenomena and, give these people some answers.
But don't you want it to get worse and worse?
Yes.
I like this comment from Lunar. Let the people have their Cinco de Mayo Drinko tomorrow and we'll reconvene for Revenge of the 6th.
All right. Cinco de Mayo.
Is there well, you mentioned that the purpose of the Christian and Atheist Book Club was to try to bring some conversation, pleasant conversation, and to build friendships. One of the weaknesses of the atheist community is the lack of community. We have no recognizable leaders, as you pointed out when you were trying to find a visual for your book club. And one of the biggest problems is that when you in the church have a major life event like a birth or a death, you have a built-in community there to support you. We do not. Do you think this might be a vehicle for bringing that kind of community to the atheist community?
Well, it was not intended to do that, but it certainly is something that has happened organically out of it that really wasn't planned. I used to tell people that we try to have friendly conversations, and several of the atheists said, we don't have friendly conversations, James, we are friends. And I go, oh, well, yeah, that's really right at this point. But the birth of the Atheist and Christian Book Club came out of that 1 year experience that I had, first of all, at the Metroplex Atheists They have a midweek fellowship right down the street from my office here in Arlington, Texas, downtown Arlington, that is basically a social. And that has a lot of the elements that I see. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it's kind of like church a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
they don't take prayer requests, but there's other elements of it. And I think that it probably was intentional on their part, and they welcomed me. So I felt like I was a visitor. In fact, they gave me a membership card that said honorary member. So I didn't want to be a regular member. But yeah, I love being an honorary member of the the Metroplex Atheists. And so so I think that they would acknowledge what you're saying, Kelly. And I think they're taking big steps to try to have some of that. So one of the other things that came out of some of the people that had been connected with Metroplex Atheists, I can't remember the names right now. We did a profile on them. That a church was formed that was called the North Texas Church of Free Thought. And it was a church that doesn't believe in God or Jesus, but it was a church. And so they had a lot more of the element. And what I found out actually at the Metroplex Atheists, that was a little controversial within the atheist community. So some of them thought, oh, that's a great idea. We should take some of these church ideas. And other people go, oh, well, we're getting a little bit too close to the flame there. And so there was a little bit of pushback from some of the atheists on that. But it was an attempt to, I think, find some what they would acknowledge to be good things about Christianity, and say, can we do away with what they would consider to be the myth and the parts that are not true, but maybe basically take some of the good parts of that. What would be wrong with having a way of having community? And this is something that is a human desire. It's not a Christian desire. This is a human desire to be able to share community.
That was a point that I was very critical of in a recent conversation between Alice Childers, Tim Barnett, and I forget who their host was, but someone made the comment about an atheist pastor, and they all started laughing as if the idea of an atheist pastor is a silly thing. And I said, no, it's not. You know, a pastor doesn't have to be a spiritual advisor. A pastor is there to help you through some of the great life changes, and we need that too. So there's no reason why we shouldn't have atheist pastors.
Well, there's been atheists that
Chaplains.
are chaplains, yes, and the whole chaplaincy program, I think it's a great thing, but I don't think if they were developing the military for the first time, it was a new thing they were just going to start. They would never have a chaplaincy program, not in our culture today. It's a leftover maybe from a time that our country was much more religious than it is now. But what they have done is modernized the chaplaincy program. So a chaplain where they're not maybe a Muslim, let's say, chaplains today and Army chaplains, what have you, they are supposed to help take care of the spiritual needs of a Muslim. Not to say that they agree with the Quran or Islam, but also that they have like secular chaplains in the military right now, that they're not, they don't believe in God at all, but they function as a chaplain. And so if I'm a Christian in the military and I need some help, I need some spiritual, some Christian books, or I need a new Bible or something, I can go to that atheist chaplain, and he doesn't have to agree with that. His job or her job is to help me with my spiritual needs as a Christian. And so I think that's what we're seeing now with the more modern concept of chaplains. And maybe you're right. Maybe we're going to see more pastors in that. I think we're seeing more the opposite. You see more pastors, historical pastors, that want to be more like a life coach or something. I think you see a little bit more of that crossover the other direction, maybe.
Yeah, this is one thing that I commend our local DHR for. Is as a CASA volunteer, one thing that I once saw was there was a child that I was an advocate for that said that she was a Satanist, and she was put into a locked facility. And as soon as she told her caseworker that it had nothing to do with religion that she was going into the locked facility. She went into the locked facility because she threatened to harm her sister. But as soon as she told her caseworker that she was a Satanist, the caseworker immediately went and purchased a satanic Bible for her and brought it to her. She actually was not really a Satanist. She said that for attention. But nevertheless, just because she made the statement, DHR tried very hard to make sure that her religious beliefs were not violated and that she had the ability to practice that religion if that's what she wanted to do.
Yeah, it's interesting on the whole Satanism issue. We do at our ministry, Watchman, we do every other month a profile, 4-page like fact sheet, research paper on a different religion or controversial doctrine, sometimes even a film or a best-selling book, usually about religions. And so we've done a number of them on Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan was one of them. We've done one. I wrote the one on Aleister Crowley, 666, the Beast, and several others. Colonel Michael Aquino, who was a disciple of Anton LaVey, he's got the Temple of Set, and these are all considered to be Satanist churches. But to come to find out, when you actually dig in and do the research on them, they probably don't. In almost all the cases, they don't believe in a literal Satan.
Right.
Or God, for that matter. It's really philosophically more atheist or agnostic. The type of thing that they're doing is called thalamic magic, a powering of the will. And a lot of it, especially in the case of LaVey, is kind of like tweaking the nose of traditional religion or Christianity. But it's philosophically, because you would think, I thought initially when I started to research it, they're going to believe that Satan is God. Come to find out, they don't believe that there is a Satan or a God.
This is a comment I've been holding for quite some time. It would be easier if Christians stopped trying to demonize atheists, among other things. I do think that street goes both ways. There are some atheists that demonize Christians as well. But Maya does have a good point, and this was the reason that I left the last church the second to the last church that I was in, was because the pastor frequently was ridiculing unbelievers and ridiculing anyone who wasn't in church every Sunday. And then at some point in every sermon, he told us that we needed to be inviting our unchurched friends to his church. And I'm thinking, why? I'd be embarrassed to have them hear one of your sermons.
Yeah, and I would agree with Maya. We should not be demonizing other people, period, regardless of whether they believe in God or not. And part of what we're trying to do at the book club is that wasn't my primary motive in this. It was more like, in my job, I should be doing more. A part of the Christian problem for me is you're totally around all the time. And so part of, our job description is we're supposed to take the gospel to the whole world. And I was teaching a course at Criswell College on evangelism. And I was feeling pretty convicted myself because I'm teaching these students how to go share the gospel. And I'm thinking, it's probably been a couple of months or maybe a year or two since I've had a conversation like that. And I'm supposed to be the teacher of this kind of thing, So what I realized is it wasn't that I just wasn't having gospel conversations with non-Christians. I wasn't having any kind of conversation with non-Christians. Mm-hmm. So it was like, everybody on my job at our ministry, they're all Christian. I go home, my family's all Christian. Finally, the weekends here, I'm in church, more Christians. I had to do something to make sure that I get out of this echo chamber I'm in and develop some friendships and relationships. And I think for some Christians, it might be to be a softball coach or to get involved with the PTA or something. But one of my things, and I have several strategies, but one of them is the book club. So I know that I'm going to, because it's on the calendar, I'm going to be sitting down in either a room in person or a Zoom room with a number of very thoughtful, well-read atheists who are going to push back a little bit. And that's helpful for me.
And that's a big problem with the Christian church is 40% of people do not ever witness at all. And the problem is the pastors go, oh, we're going to disciple you, we're going to teach you so you can witness. And then the lay people go, well, wait a minute, we want you to witness. That's why we're giving you money, because we don't want to do it. But let me tell you about Daniel Ray, who's on staff at Watchman. He went to our atheist book club, and they love him there. They really don't like me that much, but they love Daniel Ray, and he's done 2 presentations. And they're like, one of the guys said, Daniel, man, I don't have an answer for some of the things you're doing. So
Daniel goes there not to promote Christianity. He's a Christian, obviously, but he's there basically because he loves reading books, and they do a book every month, and it's a lot of times that has nothing to do really with atheism or Christianity. Sometimes
here's Ken Daniels.
Oh, Ken, there's one of our book club members.
Let me tell you the story of Ken Daniels, former missionary, Wycliffe Bible translator, missionary to Niger, I think it was. And they said, well, Ken, let's put you in the cool part of Africa and so forth. And he goes, no, I want to go to the hottest part of Africa. I mean, and Christians always say, Bill, you weren't really a Christian. Okay, I got it, because I never really did anything big. But you're going to tell Ken Daniels that was totally 100% committed to spreading the gospel. And what do you do when you become a Christian? You go, oh my gosh, I hope God doesn't send me to Africa. Ken wanted to go to Africa. So he's wrote a book, Why I Believe, and one of the really great members of our club. And people go, oh, well, it's just because of sin that you want to be an atheist. Ken never kissed anybody but his wife. He's one of the most moral people I know. He gives part of his income to charity. And you know, you've got to know.
Ken's a great guy, and he put a comment on that he gets a community and feels. I think his comment said he felt kind of like more shared community in some ways with the Christians at the book club, even though he's not a Christian. And I think that goes both ways. And again, that wasn't my initial main goal of Bill and I doing this book club, but what has come out of it is friendships. Not just do I get challenged. I get challenged in love. I know they're my friends. I had a cardiac arrest in 2018 while I was preaching, believe it or not.
Goodness.
Yes, I was in the middle of my sermon. My heart stopped, and I fell. And some people will do anything for a sermon illustration. But what happened is, in the hospital the next day, I get flowers from the Metroplex Atheists. And one of our club members who was atheist wrote me the kindest note, and I knew it was sincere. And again, so I cherish the friendships that I have with the Christians and the atheists in our book club. We've developed some relationships and friendships, and we try real hard. We had one book club that was a little less than respectful.
That's the Iron Rod thing, yeah.
I wasn't going to mention any names.
The great John Loftus, who is one of my heroes.
But typically, it is something that is extremely respectful with the steel manning, and Mark says a heart-stopping sermon.
By the way, Ken Daniels' wife is still a Christian, kind of like your situation.
Yeah.
So they go to Sundays going. Ken's like, okay, and then the other Sunday he said, I gotta say something. So
yeah, but Ken is a very thoughtful guy, and we've had great conversations, and he's very transparent. I love that about him too. And so Kelly, you need to have him on as a guest and talk about his book.
I put something in the chat there that I would like to have Ken on as a guest, and I need Bill to give me some contact information.
Oh, absolutely. And during his deconversion, when he was still a missionary, they said just read Christian books for 6 months. So that's what he did. He said this was extremely difficult to get out of the faith. So he tried, but.
Another thing he pointed out that I had never thought of, but I've seen, and I know experientially now, as far as talking with other people, that is exactly the case. Is you have this, Christian monotheism on the one hand, atheism on the other hand, but there's this in between place where it is neither theism or atheism. It is deism.
Like universalism was her halfway house.
Okay, well, deism was his deism. And so during the 18th century, early American history, some of the founding fathers were deists, and it was this up and coming philosophy that for some reason just completely fell apart. You find very few people today that self-identify as deists, that there is a creator God, but that God has nothing to do with what we do today. That he got everything started and it explains how we have a universe, but then steps out of the picture. And so, but Kim pointed out, he said deism for him was a stepping stone from theism to atheism. So he was a deist for a while, but he said that stepping stone works the other direction. He's seen atheists, and I've seen the same thing, who become deists, seems like a transitional spot, and then later become theists. So it's kind of a stepping stone both directions. Have you ever come across that, Kelly?
I've not met anyone that went, well, actually, I take it back. I've met one person who went from atheism to theism. And when he did, his theism is kind of sort of almost more deism than it is theism, because he believes in some form of a God, but he really isn't sure what this God is, which I don't know. You could even call that, well, no, that definitely is not agnosticism. But
Antony Flew is one of the most predominant atheist voices of philosophical academic voices of atheism in the 20th century. And shortly before his death, he was friends with Gary Habermas. They did some atheist Christian debates back and forth. And but he did turn away from his atheism, but he didn't become a Christian. He did the stepping stone. He became a deist after he stopped. He started believing that there was a God, but he never accepted before his death the Christian God, or Christianity as a whole, theism.
We are out of time.
Wow, this has gone by fast. This has been great. Yeah,
it usually does. It has been a pleasure to have both of you on. I'm going to let you each have an opportunity to make one last comment if you would like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would encourage, we're looking for some more thoughtful, well-read atheists that could be joining our Atheist Christian Book Club. And more information, go to atheistchristianbookclub.com. And then if you want to know more about our ministry, Watchman Fellowship, it's at watchman.org. And I'd love to communicate, whether you're Christian or atheist, love to have you part of the club and get to know you better.
I was about to say, go ahead.
There is a link to the book club in the description. So if you'd like to subscribe to the book club, just click the link.
I was going to say, thank God for people like you, Kelly, that make this dialogue possible. But I'd say, hey, how about thank goodness for you? But yeah, thank you a lot for having us on and for making this possible, and for having, and hopefully May 11th, we can have a dialogue with Eric Hernandez. By the way, his book, A Lazy Approach to Evangelism, this is going to be our next book. Please read it. Great book. I've really enjoyed it. And, thanks again.
Okay. And Eric will be the guest on next week's stream. So, and Bill will be back with me on that one as well. So thank you to all of you in the chat for your comments and questions. Thank you everyone for your view, and live your life.
Woo.